Welcome to the Story Atelier, the place where heartfelt, inspiring, and deeply meaningful stories come to life. If you love stories full of emotion, journeys of overcoming challenges, and exploring the true values of life, then this is the perfect channel for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on any incredible stories. We greatly appreciate your support as we work together to spread meaningful stories and build a community that shares a love for inspiring tales. Share this video and join us as we dive into powerful and touching narratives from everyday life. Thank you for being part of the Story Atelier, where every story has the power to touch your heart. It was a cold winter morning in 2016 when 5 orphaned children, shivering and huddled together for warmth, were found abandoned in a small rural town in the heart of the Midwest. The streets were eerily quiet, covered with a thick blanket of frost, while the faint crow of a rooster echoed from the nearby barns. The day was starting like any other, but little did anyone know, it would be a turning point in the lives of these children and the man who would unexpectedly change their fate. The children had no home, no family, and no hope. There was a sense of desperation in the air as the eldest girl, Lily, stepped forward to protect her younger siblings. She was about 10 years old, her face marked by fear, but also determination. She stood firmly in front of her younger sisters and brother, her arms wrapped protectively around them. Behind her, her 4 siblings clung to each other, the smallest, MIA, no more than 2 years old, clinging tightly to Lily's leg, eyes filled with fear, unable to speak but begging for help with her wide, tear-filled eyes. As a local resident rushed to the town's police station, shouting for help, the authorities were quick to respond. Among them was Sam, a man in his early 50s, a veteran of the Vietnam War. Sam lived alone in a modest cabin just outside the town, and while he wasn't exactly the picture of wealth or social prominence, he was well known for his kindness and willingness to help others. When Sam arrived at the scene, he froze for a moment. The sight of the 5 children standing there, their tiny faces stained with tears, their frail bodies shaking in the cold, struck him like a hammer. These children were alone, abandoned, and they needed someone. He didn't even think twice. The authorities at first attempted to convince the children to go to a local shelter, but Lily, standing as the protector of the group, refused. "We don't want to go anywhere without each other," she cried, her voice cracking. "Please, don't separate us." The social worker who had arrived with the police explained that they had to separate the children because no one could take in all 5. Sam stepped forward, his heart heavy with the weight of their words. He couldn't bear the thought of these children being torn apart, and yet, he had no idea how he would manage to care for them. But there was no turning back. He knew what had to be done. Turning to the social worker, Sam spoke with conviction. "If no one else will take them, I will." The room fell silent. People exchanged uncertain looks. "But Sam," the social worker said, "you're a single man. How will you manage? You don't even have a family of your own." But Sam's resolve was unshaken. "I may not have a lot, but I have a heart that can love them like my own. If they need a home, then I will be their home." His voice was calm but resolute, and the social worker, though still skeptical, could see the sincerity in his eyes. They would have to investigate further, but for now, the children were allowed to stay with Sam. Sam had always lived alone, his small cabin just big enough for himself. But now, it would have to fit 5 children, each of them carrying their own trauma, their own grief, and their own hopes for a better life. He was about to embark on a journey that would change his life forever. And perhaps, in the process, give these children something they had never known, a family. The first few days were challenging, to say the least. Sam had to quickly adjust to the needs of the children, most of whom were far from accustomed to any sense of routine or care. Lily, the oldest, quickly took on the role of caretaker, helping Sam with everything from cooking meals to looking after her younger siblings. But even she was struggling to manage the new reality. Sam, for his part, worked tirelessly. During the day, he would go to his farm to tend to the animals and grow vegetables for their meals. In the evenings, he would take on odd jobs around town, earning what little he could to support the growing family. His hands, which once wielded weapons in war, were now calloused from farming tools and hauling lumber. But there was no turning back. He was determined to make it work. But the challenges didn't end there. The children, especially Lily, carried deep scars from the trauma of losing their parents and being abandoned. At night, Sam would hear their sobs, their whispers in the dark, as they tried to adjust to the idea of someone, especially a man, taking on the role of their protector. Despite the struggles, Sam's heart swelled with love. He knew that this was just the beginning. There would be many more trials ahead, but he was committed to showing these children the love and care they so desperately needed. Little by little, they began to trust him. Sam, in turn, began to feel something he hadn't felt in years: hope. It was a quiet, unspoken feeling, but it was there, growing stronger with each passing day. Lily, who had once been filled with fear and uncertainty, began to smile more, even if it was a small smile at first. Mia, the youngest, stopped crying at night, and the others began to settle into their new life, each finding their own place in the household. It was far from perfect, but it was a start that Sam hoped would lead them all to something better. As the first winter passed and spring began to creep in, Sam realized that he wasn't just providing a home for these children. He was building something much more profound, and little did he know, this was only the beginning of a long, beautiful journey, one that would test his strength, his heart, and his very soul. But Sam was ready. After all, he had already faced so much in his life. This challenge, he knew, was one he could face with the love of his new family by his side. As spring began to thaw the frozen landscape, life for Sam and his new family of 5 slowly began to take shape. But despite the warming weather, the atmosphere in Sam's small cabin remained tense. There was much to adjust to, and the difficulties of those first few months were far from over. The family was far from perfect, and their new life together felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap at any moment. The children, despite the love and care Sam offered, carried the heavy weight of loss. Lily, as the eldest, had quickly taken on the role of protector, but she was not without her struggles. She had been forced to grow up too quickly, and beneath her protective exterior, there was a deep well of fear and uncertainty. She often found herself awake at night, listening for any sound that would indicate that her sisters and brother were in danger. The memories of her parents' death haunted her, and she often had nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, her heart racing. Sam, though he tried his best, wasn't equipped to ease Lily's fears. He was just one man, and the weight of raising 5 children, all with their own emotional scars, was heavier than he had ever imagined. But he couldn't turn back. He had promised to protect them, and he would keep that promise, no matter the cost. During the day, Sam worked relentlessly. His farm required constant attention, and his odd jobs around town barely covered the cost of food and essentials for his new family. The cabin, which had once been small and cozy for just one person, now felt cramped and chaotic. There were constant arguments among the children, Lily trying to get everyone to follow a routine, Mia refusing to eat her vegetables, Noah always running outside and getting into trouble. The cabin was filled with the noise of childhood, both joyful and frustrating, but there was one constant in the house: Sam's unwavering love. Every evening, after a long day of work, he would sit at the kitchen table with the children, doing his best to listen to their worries and encourage them. The smallest moments meant the most, when Lily would sit beside him and quietly say, "Thank you, Sam, for not making us leave each other," or when Mia would climb into his lap, wrapping her tiny arms around him, saying, "You're my daddy now." It was in these small moments that Sam realized he had started to fill the hole left in his own heart. He had once been a man who lived alone, focusing on survival and getting by, but now, he had a reason to keep going. The children needed him, and he couldn't bear the thought of them being taken away or forced to face the world without him. Still, the reality of raising 5 kids was harsh. Sam wasn't a professional caregiver, and there were days when he was simply too tired to keep up. The financial strain was immense. He didn't have the means to buy new clothes or toys for the children, let alone provide them with things that most families take for granted. The cabin was small, and despite Sam's best efforts to keep it clean and cozy, it always seemed cluttered. The kids' needs were endless, and Sam was constantly running on empty. One of the hardest adjustments for Sam was managing the children's emotional baggage. Each of the kids had their own unique struggles. Lily, despite being strong and protective, had developed a fierce independence that sometimes made it hard for her to connect with Sam. She had been forced to grow up too fast, and now, she found it difficult to trust anyone completely. Mia, the youngest, clung to Sam the most, but her attachment came from fear, not love. She had lost both of her parents and didn't understand why things had to change. Noah, the middle child, was often angry, struggling with his own feelings of abandonment, and the youngest girls, Emma and Sophie, were simply confused, looking for a sense of stability in a world that had torn their family apart. Sam found it hard to know how to approach each child. Lily needed space and reassurance, while Mia needed constant attention. Noah needed discipline, but Sam was uncertain about how to approach the challenge without pushing him further away. Emma and Sophie, who were still so young, needed guidance but could hardly understand the complexities of their new life. One particularly tough evening, after a long day of work, Sam returned home to find that Noah had gotten into trouble again. The boy had sneaked out to play with the neighborhood kids and had come home muddy and covered in scratches. Sam was tired and frustrated. He knew he needed to be patient, but after a long week of barely scraping by, he couldn't help but snap. "Noah," Sam exclaimed, his voice sharper than he intended. "What did I tell you about running off like that? Do you have any idea what could have happened to you? What's wrong with you?" Noah stood there, his head lowered, tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, his voice cracking. Lily stepped in, as she always did, trying to protect her brother. "It's not his fault, Sam," she said, her voice shaky. He's scared. We all are." Sam looked at her, his expression softening. She was right. He was asking too much too soon. He hadn't given Noah the opportunity to process everything that had happened to him. Sam knelt down in front of the boy, his tone more gentle now. "I know you're scared," Sam said quietly. "We all are, but you have to listen. I'm here to protect you. You're safe now, but I need you to trust me. All right?" Noah nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. It wasn't an easy moment, but it was a start. Sam was beginning to understand that love wasn't just about providing for these children. It was about earning their trust and showing them that he would always be there, even when things seemed impossible. Meanwhile, outside the cabin, the snow began to melt, and with it, the uncertainty in Sam's heart began to thaw as well. He wasn't sure how he was going to make it through the coming months. But one thing was certain, he was not giving up. This was his family now, and he would do whatever it took to keep them together. The days were long, and the struggles were many, but Sam's determination never wavered. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he was prepared to fight for this family. Little by little, he could see the children beginning to heal, even if it was only a small amount each day. They were learning to trust him, and that, in itself, was a victory. As summer arrived, the family's lives were still tangled in the web of struggles and emotional scars. The days became longer and warmer, but for Sam, the weight of raising 5 children was never far from his mind. The physical labor on his small farm never stopped, and he found himself working harder than ever to provide for the kids. But despite his tireless effort, doubts started to creep in, especially when it came to the approval of the authorities and his ability to truly give these children the life they deserved. It wasn't long before Sam's commitment was questioned by the local social services department. as part of the process to keep the children in his care. Sam had to meet with a caseworker and provide a detailed account of his ability to support and care for the children. The woman, Mrs. Parker, was thorough, and though she was polite, she made no secret of her concerns. Sam's life, after all, wasn't exactly a picture of stability. His home was small and rustic, his income barely sufficient to meet the needs of a single person, let alone 5 children, and, most notably, Sam was a single man, without the formal training or support system that many people considered essential for raising children. "I know you mean well, Sam," Mrs. Parker said, her voice sympathetic but firm as she sat across from him in his modest living room. "But you're facing challenges that no one man should have to face alone. The children need more than what you can provide. You need a stable environment. And I'm afraid this isn't it." Sam sat quietly, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He could see the concern in her eyes, but it stung just the same. He knew he didn't have much. He knew his life wasn't perfect, but he also knew one thing: he loved these children more than anything in the world. And he wasn't about to let him down, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. "I understand your concerns, Mrs. Parker," Sam replied, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "But I've lived through worse. I've been through wars, battles, and losses that many can't even imagine. I can handle this. These kids need me, and I'm not going anywhere." Mrs. Parker sighed, glancing at the photos of the children hanging on the walls. She had seen the joy in their eyes when they were together. She had seen the way they clung to Sam as though he were their lifeline. But her job was to think about their future, not just their present. "Sam, I want to believe you," she said quietly, "but you need to show us you can provide them with a future. And I'm afraid I don't see that happening here." The conversation left Sam feeling deflated, but it also sparked something inside of him, a burning determination to prove her wrong. He would show her, and everyone else who doubted him, that he was more than capable of giving these kids a better life. But Sam knew that he needed help, and that help was not going to come from social services or anyone else in the town. It had to come from him. From his heart, from his commitment to this family. After Mrs. Parker left, Sam sat in the quiet of his home, staring out the window at the field beyond. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the sky. He was tired, his body aching from the day's work. But it was more than just physical exhaustion. His spirit felt drained, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up the facade of being everything the children needed. There were days when he thought he would break, when the weight of it all seemed unbearable. But then he heard a sound behind him, the soft patter of little feet. It was Lily, her face serious but calm. She stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay, Sam?" she asked, her voice soft and hesitant. Sam turned to her, offering a tired smile. "I'm fine, kiddo," he said, though his voice lacked the usual warmth. "I heard what Mrs. Parker said," Lily said quietly, stepping into the room. "She's right. You know, you can't do this alone. But we can. We'll help you. We're your family now, Sam. You don't have to do everything on your own." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He had been so focused on the idea that he alone had to make everything work, that he had forgotten the most important thing, that they were all in this together. He had spent so much time trying to prove himself to others that he had forgotten to trust in the bond they had formed, in the strength of the love they shared. Sam felt a surge of emotion, and for a moment, he simply looked at Lily, the girl who had started out as nothing more than an orphan but had become so much more. She had become his strength, his inspiration. She was no longer just a child to him, she was his daughter. And he wasn't going to fail her. "You're right, Lily," Sam said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't have to do this alone. We're a family, and we'll get through this together. I promise you." Lily smiled, the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. "We'll be okay, Sam. I know we will." And with those words, a new sense of purpose filled Sam's heart. The road ahead would still be difficult, but Sam was no longer facing it alone. His family, these 5 children, were his reason for living, and together, they would overcome whatever obstacles lay in their path. The next few weeks were a turning point for the family. Sam's determination to make things work only grew stronger, and he started taking on more work around town, even if it meant long hours and little rest. He worked late into the night, trying to earn enough money to cover the bills, to buy clothes for the children, and to save for the future. But no matter how exhausted he was, he always found time to sit with the children, to talk with them, and to remind them that they were a family. He made sure they knew they were loved, that they had a home, and that they would never have to face the world alone again. And in turn, the children began to heal. They started to trust Sam even more, to see him not just as a guardian but as a father. Lily's walls began to come down, and she started to open up more, letting Sam in on the emotions and fears she had been holding onto for so long. Mia, once so fearful, began to smile more often, and Noah slowly started to channel his anger into something more productive. The younger girls, Emma and Sophie, learned to play together, and their laughter began to fill the cabin, making it feel more like a home. By the time the next winter came, the family was stronger, their bond unbreakable. They had weathered the storm, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, Sam knew one thing for sure: he would never let go of them. Not for anything. They had become his world, and together, they would face whatever challenges the future brought. The days grew colder as autumn turned to winter, and for Sam, it felt like time was both moving too quickly and not fast enough. He had come a long way since that first day he had taken in the 5 orphaned children. But the obstacles were far from over, though their lives were more stable. The pressure on Sam was mounting. The financial strain was constant. The children still had emotional baggage. And most of all, the judgment from the outside world never seemed to stop. In the small town, news of Sam's decision to take in 5 children had spread quickly. Some people admired him for his courage and selflessness, while others questioned his ability to care for them. There were whispers behind closed doors, with some residents suggesting that he was doing it for attention or personal gain. It was impossible to ignore the gossip, and Sam found himself more isolated than ever. Despite his best efforts, the judgment of others weighed heavily on him. One evening, Sam was sitting by the fireplace with the children, trying to shake off the doubts that had been creeping into his mind. Lily, now a teenager, was sitting next to him, her head resting on his shoulder. The younger girls, Emma and Sophie, were playing a quiet game in the corner, while Noah was tinkering with a small toy he had made out of scraps he had found in the shed. The house was warm, filled with the soft crackle of the fire and the comforting sounds of family. But even in these peaceful moments, Sam couldn't help but worry. How long could he keep this up? The bills were piling up, and his body was growing tired. His work on the farm and the odd jobs around town had taken their toll, and he often found himself falling asleep at the kitchen table after a long day. Lily seemed to sense his unease and turned to him. "Sam," she said quietly, "we're doing okay. I know things aren't perfect, but we have each other, and that's all that matters." Her words, simple as they were, struck a chord in Sam's heart. He knew she was right, but it wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up the fight alone. The next day, after a particularly exhausting morning spent working the farm, Sam walked into town to pick up a few supplies. He had learned long ago that, while life was hard, there were always small moments of kindness that kept him going. And on that day, he was about to experience one of those moments. As he walked into the general store, he was greeted by Mrs. Lee, the elderly owner. Mrs. Lee had always been kind to him, but she had never offered much more than a polite smile. Today, however, there was something different in her eyes. "Sam," she said, her voice warm and friendly, "I've been meaning to talk to you. I've been hearing a lot of talk around town, and I just want to say, I think what you're doing is incredible, raising those kids on your own. giving him a home. It's not something many people would do. Sam was taken aback. He had grown used to the whispers, the doubt, and the judgment, but here was someone who understood, someone who saw beyond the surface. "Thank you, Mrs. Lee," Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. "It hasn't been easy, but they're my family now. I'm just doing what I have to do." Mrs. Lee nodded, her eyes kind. "I know," she said, "and you're not doing it alone. Sam, you've got more support than you think." Sam raised an eyebrow, unsure what she meant. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Lee smiled knowingly. "You might not have noticed, but the community is starting to come around. People are seeing what you've done, and they're starting to realize that what you're doing is something special. You've inspired a lot of people around here. Sam, you're not alone, and we're all here to help." Sam's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. He had spent so much time feeling like an outsider, like he was fighting a battle no one else cared about. But now, Mrs. Lee's words felt like a lifeline. For the first time in a long while, Sam felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't fighting alone. Over the next few weeks, the shift in the community became more apparent. People who had once whispered behind his back now offered help in tangible ways. Neighbors stopped by with bags of groceries or hand-me-down clothes for the children. A local mechanic offered to fix Sam's old truck for free, knowing how hard Sam worked to get by. Even the school teachers, who had been wary about Sam's ability to support the children's education, began to offer their assistance, tutoring the kids and making sure they had the resources they needed to succeed in school. The turning point came one chilly November afternoon when Sam received a knock at his door. It was Mr. Carter, a well-known businessman in the town, who had always been somewhat of a skeptic when it came to Sam's situation. Sam had always been polite, but the two had never really spoken much beyond pleasantries. "Sam," Mr. Carter said, "I've been thinking. I know times have been tough, and I've seen how hard you've been working. I want to offer something to help. I'm not much for charity, but I do know a thing or two about running a business. I'd like to offer you a loan to help you expand your farm. I know it's not much, but I believe in what you're doing, and I want to help you give those kids the life they deserve." Sam was stunned. He had never imagined that someone like Mr. Carter, who had always kept his distance, would offer such help. But as he looked into Mr. Carter's eyes, he saw something different, genuine respect. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. This will make all the difference." Mr. Carter smiled. "No need to thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're giving those kids a future, and that's something worth supporting." With this unexpected help, Sam's farm began to grow. He could finally afford to hire some extra help for the harvest, and he was able to purchase better equipment that made his work easier. Slowly but surely, Sam's life was improving, and so was the life of the children he had taken in. As winter settled in, the family's days became easier. The children were growing, thriving in the love and stability Sam had given them. Lily, once the reluctant caretaker, had found herself becoming a young woman with dreams of her own. Emma had taken up drawing, filling the house with beautiful sketches of their life together. Noah had begun to show an interest in mechanics, spending hours in the garage learning from Sam how to fix things. Sophie, the youngest, had a natural gift for storytelling, and she often wrote short stories about their life, imagining adventures that took them to far-off lands. With the help of his community, Sam had managed to turn the corner. No longer was he fighting this battle alone. His bond with the children had only grown stronger, and now, the entire town was beginning to see them as a family. The love and support Sam had given to his children had been returned tenfold by the very people who had once doubted him. The air had a crispness to it that winter morning, a chill that carried with it the promise of new beginnings. It had been nearly 2 years since Sam had taken in the 5 orphaned children. And in that time, his life had transformed in ways he hadn't thought possible. The road had been long and full of hardship, but they had made it. together, and as the sun slowly rose over the horizon, casting golden light over the land, Sam realized that they were finally where they belonged. They were home. The house, once so small and cramped, now felt like a true home. The noise of everyday life, laughter, bickering, the sound of little feet running across the floor, was a constant presence. And it brought Sam a joy he had never known. The children, who had once been so lost, now had bright eyes full of hope. They were growing into remarkable young people, each finding their place in the world, each holding on to the love and support Sam had given them. They were no longer orphans, but part of something bigger, a family that had weathered every storm. And in the process, become stronger. Lily, now 16, had blossomed into a thoughtful, intelligent young woman. She had once carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. But now she was learning to dream again. She had taken an interest in teaching, and with Sam's encouragement, she began tutoring other children in the town, helping them with their studies and showing them that it was okay to reach for something greater. One evening, as Sam watched her work with some of the younger children in the community, he couldn't help but smile. She had become so much more than just a protector. She had become a leader, a mentor. Sam, you know, Lily said one evening as they sat together at the kitchen table, I think I want to go to college. I want to become a teacher, like the ones who helped me when I was younger. I want to give other kids the kind of future that I never thought I could have. Sam's heart swelled with pride as he looked at her. Lily, he said softly, I'm proud of you. You've worked so hard, and you've done it all with such heart. If this is what you want, you'll make it happen. I'll help you any way I can. Lily smiled, her eyes shining with determination. Thanks, Sam. I couldn't have gotten this far without you. Meanwhile, Noah had found his own calling. The anger that had once consumed him had slowly faded, replaced by a quiet focus and a newfound sense of purpose. He had spent many afternoons with Sam, learning the ins and outs of carpentry and mechanical work. Sam had always admired Noah's natural talent for building and fixing things. And over time, Noah had begun to repair and restore old furniture, turning discarded pieces into beautiful works of art. He had even started selling his creations at the local market, gaining a reputation for his craftsmanship. Noah's transformation was nothing short of incredible. He had gone from a troubled boy to a young man with pride in his work and a vision for his future. And though Sam had his moments of doubt, seeing Noah's success reminded him that sometimes the hardest paths led to the most rewarding destinations. Hey, Sam, I finished that shelf for the living room, Noah said one afternoon, a wide grin on his face as he presented his latest project. Sam looked at the shelf, impressed by the meticulous craftsmanship. It looks great, Noah. You're really starting to make a name for yourself. Noah's grin grew wider. Thanks. I think I might try selling some more. Maybe open my own shop one day. Sam nodded, his eyes filled with pride. I have no doubt you'll get there. Emma, the artistic soul of the family, had found her passion in painting. Her art reflected the journey they had all been on, the struggle, the growth, the love. She had started painting portraits of her siblings, capturing their faces with such detail and emotion that it left Sam speechless every time. The walls of their cabin were now filled with vibrant paintings, each one telling a story, each one reminding him of how far they had come. Emma had also started teaching art classes to the younger children in the town, helping them express themselves through their creativity. She found joy in seeing the children she taught grow more confident, just as she had done herself. The community had embraced her artistic talent, and she was gaining recognition for her work. Sam, look at this one, Emma said excitedly, holding up her latest painting of Lily. I think this one's my best yet. Sam looked at the portrait of Lily, her eyes captured so beautifully that it almost felt like she was right there, looking back at him. It's incredible, Emma. You have a real gift. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm just happy I found something I love doing. Sophie, the youngest, had blossomed into a curious and thoughtful young girl. At the age of 11, she had already written several short stories about their family and their life together. Her imagination knew no bounds, and she loved to sit with Sam in the evenings, reading her latest stories to him. "I wrote a new one today," Sophie said shyly, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's about our family, and how we saved each other." Sam listened intently as Sophie read aloud, her words painting pictures in his mind of a world where love and kindness could conquer all. He had no doubt that Sophie would grow up to be a writer, telling stories of hope and resilience. "I love it, Sophie," Sam said with a smile. "You're going to inspire a lot of people with your stories." And finally, Mia, the youngest of all, had grown into a sweet, compassionate girl who was always looking out for her siblings. She had a natural ability to make others feel at ease, and her empathy and kindness had made her a favorite among the other children in town. Mia's dreams were still forming, but Sam knew she would go on to do something meaningful with her life. Just like the others, one chilly evening, after a long day of work, Sam sat on the porch of their now much larger home, looking out at the stars with the 5 children gathered around him. The house, once a humble cabin barely big enough for one person, was now a symbol of everything they had built together. Sam had done more than provide shelter for them. He had given them a home filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. "Sam," Lily said, her voice filled with a soft reverence, "I know we've had our struggles, but we've made it. We've made it because of you." Sam looked at the children, his heart overflowing with gratitude. "No, Lily, we made it because of all of us. I couldn't have done this without you. You're my family, and you always will be." They sat there together, in the warmth of the firelight, knowing that the road ahead would still have its challenges. But now, they had each other, and with that, there was nothing they couldn't face. And as the years passed, Sam's family grew stronger, their love deeper. Sam had once been a man who lived alone, but now, he was surrounded by children who had become his own, each one of them carrying their dreams, their talents, and their love for him. Together, they had overcome the greatest of odds. They had built something beautiful, something that no amount of time or hardship could ever take away. The family Sam had created was not just bound by blood, but by the love and sacrifices that had brought him together, and that, Sam knew, was all that mattered.